Simon Ball is the author of the book Death to Order, A Modern History of Assassination. Professor Ball is British and is located at the University of Leeds. His publisher, Yale Press, says, quote, "Assassination, the murder of a specific individual by an organized conspiracy in pursuit of political ends, has shaped the fate not only of the famous and infamous victims, but also of nations and empires." Simon Ball tells the story of hundreds of assassins, starts his focus on 1914 to the present. He claims the most important assassination during those years was the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which was the start of World War I. Simon Ball, how did you get interested in the first place in assassins?
I didn't start off interested in assassins. I was actually working on small arms control. And I was in the National Archives in Kew, just outside London, British National Archives, and I was reading some papers about a 1917 British investigation into small arms control. And someone said, anybody with one of these weapons, by which they meant semi-automatic pistols, could kill a viceroy or a police inspector. And it just struck me as interesting. So I thought, well, I'll follow that up. I'll have a look and see if that's true. And it kind of went from there.
What did you do next?
Well, I did what all kind of professional historians do. I just kept burrowing into the archives and having a look round to see what there was. And what I discovered was that major states keep lots of archives on assassination. They don't necessarily answer the questions that journalists want answered, because they're not, always, the most famous assassinations, but they keep notes on all kinds of things, and that includes secret services, foreign ministries, home ministries. And so I had a look around, and as I read further into these archives, I thought there's a structure here. There is a way of understanding it. It isn't just kind of the woozy carousel of death. There is something which helps us think about assassination in these archives. So I thought, okay, I'll write that down.
So what was your structure? What did you come up with?
So the structure is that, or the key idea is that the state is at the center of assassination in the modern world. And I'm talking post-1914, from the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand onwards. And that doesn't mean that states are always behind assassinations, although they often are. What it means is that it's states, and particularly great powers, i.e. states that have the ability to do something within the international system, who have to deal with assassinations. And so, and it's what they do rather than the assassination itself, by and large, which has an impact on the international system. So instead, I was interested in assassins, and I'm certainly interested in the victims of assassination. But I was primarily interested in policymakers, politicians, diplomats, civil servants, policemen, Secret Service, both in the American sense and also in the broader intelligence community sense. What they did, and so I thought there was a structure that emerged, and the structure goes something like this: 1914, assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. You can't ignore assassination after that. You can't write it off as a bunch of anarchists, small groups, because here you have a state-sponsored assassination and it causes a major international conflagration. So policymakers in increasingly Western democratic powers have to take it seriously. So it comes near to the center of their attention. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that by, I'm going to say 1941, but we can say the late 1930s onwards, democratic powers become convinced that they should be able to carry out assassinations, that they're not just the people on the receiving end, but they should be able to dish out assassinations as well. Now, that has very little impact on the Second World War. Culturally it does, but not in the result of the Second World War. But during the Second World War, particularly the British and the Americans and others, the French, say we should have an assassination capability. And the third major change comes in the 1980s, when all the great powers build a kind of integrated security system to keep their own elites safe, which has the partial impact of divorcing them from the populations. Then after 2002, you see very high-tech assassination carried out by states. So you have those eras. And so I thought that was a good explanatory framework for what was going on.
On the last page of your book, you say this: the U.S. government seems content with its 21st century killing machine, but has racked up an unenviable record of losing armed conflicts while it has been in operation. Explain.
Yes. Well, the killing machine, which is an American term, it's a quote, is developed, although the first attempts are made in the first decade of the 21st century, but it's really developed kind of right at the end of the Bush administration, the beginning of the Obama administration. That's the stage where the integration has taken place, where you have the technology, whether it be drones or manned aircraft. Drones usually get the attention, but it's not just drones. You have the intelligence, you have the organizations that can do this, and you have some kind of command and control structure which works. So the focus of that machine is Afghanistan to an extent and Iraq. And the machine works. Kind of the Americans can pick off their enemies in these countries, and also in other countries who might have something to do with their central concerns in Central Asia and the Middle East. But I don't think anybody wishes to argue that the American campaigns in Afghanistan or Iraq were stunning military successes. In both of those cases, the United States was essentially defeated and forced to get out of these countries. They didn't get what they wanted. So although the machine worked, it didn't bring strategic victory to the United States, didn't bring military victory, didn't bring operational victory. So you can have a highly effective machine, but it's not necessarily going to help the strategic goals of the United States as a superpower.
You have a quote in the book. You say in the decade after Sarajevo, and we give you plenty of time to explain that, few probed too deeply into the assassination. In 1923, when Winston Churchill wrote The World Crisis, he thought the details of Sarajevo so unimportant that he devoted one line to the assassination, getting both the name of the victim and the method of killing wrong.
Yes. So at the end of the First World War, the great powers, as part of the Versailles process, which ended the war kind of against Germany and imposed a peace settlement on Germany, included a war guilt clause. they said that Germany and German ambition to dominate Europe was the cause of the First World War. They did give some attention. There was an investigatory commission to the assassination at Sarajevo, and they said the Emperor of Austria in 1914 had said it was a group of unaligned fanatics that had killed the Archduke, but that didn't really matter. What mattered was the Germans, and so you could look into the details, but really it didn't matter. What then happened was that there were investigations in the 1920s, powered by the Germans to an extent, who wanted to get out from under the war guilt clause. There was genuine interest in places like London. There were people who wanted to investigate in a disinterested way. And the Serbs, as they had been in 1914, the Yugoslavs, as they are after the First World War, begin to fall out with each other and begin to make statements about what had happened in 1914. And by 1930, various investigators had put this together. They hadn't got all the details, but they knew enough to know that this was really what the Austro-Hungarians had said it was in 1914, but couldn't prove, that this was a state-sponsored assassination, that Serbia, a state, was behind the assassination. And once you understand that, that changes the way that policymakers have to think about assassination. It's one thing acknowledging that assassinations can have very bad consequences, but it's another thing acknowledging that one state can attack another state through assassination, and if not deliberately, then at least knowingly cause a great international crisis. And so after about 1930, newspapers changed their tune. The Times of London, for instance, adopts this opinion in the 1930s, where in the 1920s it had dismissed that. And Churchill himself, when he writes about this later on, says, the guilty men, yes, some of them were in Berlin, but others were in Vienna, and some of them were in Belgrade. So the blame has to be shared around, and that assassination was important, and we have to remember that.
Can you tell us the story of how that assassination came together?
Yes, so there were various strands to the conspiracy. There was a group of Bosnian Serb assassins, terrorists, who wanted to join Bosnia, which had been taken over by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, onto Serbia to create Greater Serbia. So there was that. There was Serbian military intelligence, which was running networks across the border into Serbia with a view to subverting Austro-Hungarian rule. There was a secret society called the Black Hand in Belgrade, which was devoted to terrorist attacks on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The military intelligence personnel and the members of the secret society were largely the same people. So this is Serbian military intelligence using this Bosnian Serb assassination squad. And the government of Serbia, both the Prime Minister, Kopacic, and the Crown Prince, Alexander, if they don't know the details of this exact assassination, are very pro-terrorist. There's a terrorist network which they nurture in Belgrade. So this all comes together in June 1914. the assassins crossed the border from Serbia into Bosnia with the help of Serbian military intelligence. They go to Sarajevo. There's a 7-man assassination squad. They wait for the Archduke, who's in a highly publicized visit. He drives along the road. They throw a bomb at him. It hits his car, but it doesn't kill him. He gets to the town hall in Sarajevo. There's some confusion. He drives back. There's more confusion. And one of the assassination squad shoots him with the semi-automatic pistol that we started with, kind of a Browning, which is like a Hoover. It's a kind of brand name. It is actually a Browning design pistol in this case, but it's just a term for a semi-automatic pistol. So that pistol really does do the job.
Of the 7, how many were either executed or put in jail, or what happened to them?
So the one of them got away completely because he actually didn't make an attack. He just left. That left 6. The 2 assassins, the bomb thrower and the shooter, were not assassinated. Were not condemned to death because they were too young. So the older members of the squad were put to death, were just judicially executed after a trial, but the 2 younger assassins were sent to prison, where the actual shooter, Gavrilo Princip, died of tuberculosis. So the Austro-Hungarians did not put him to death.
I know you're a historian and that it's what you do for a living, but when I was reading your book, I kept saying, how in the world has he kept track of these hundreds of people that you write about? How did you do that?
I did it by having a very thorough system of notes and being aware of the underlying structures which I was talking about at the beginning. I'd worked on this for some time, so before I started writing, I knew kind of the structure of what I was doing, and there were about 600 assassinations, kind of which I was playing with, and I didn't start off, unlike a political scientist, I didn't start off by choosing those assassinations. I found them in the archives. These were the assassinations which at least one major state took an interest in and investigated. And part of the kind of methodological argument of the book is that in studying assassination, it's sometimes better to concentrate on those assassinations which were properly investigated at the time than assassinations which we think ex post facto are very important because they're remembered, but might not have been well investigated. For instance, go back to Sarajevo, it wasn't a well investigated assassination. The Austrians didn't have particularly good intelligence or police system for this kind of thing, and it wasn't well investigated. Whereas the British in India, where there was lots of assassination, had developed a very good intelligence and police system for pursuing assassins. And so you get great files from the British, but not very good ones from the Austrians. So sometimes it's worth dwelling on the ones where there are good papers. Doesn't mean you ignore the ones which were badly done, but it gives you a kind of structure of what you're going to concentrate on.
Because we have mostly an American audience, how did the attempted assassination of President Trump affect your view of assassination?
I mean, in a way, I mean, I don't want to sound, kind of wise after the fact, but it confirmed one of the theses of the book. So I had finished the first draft of the book, and then the Butler shooting occurred. So I did return to it, but I wasn't using a great deal of documentary evidence, although later on there were reports done by the US state which came into the public domain, and I could use those. But mainly I watched it and kind of the live recording. And one of the theses of the book is that the most important thing about assassination is the security system which those Western states have developed. Not just America, but all Western states. There are differences, there are cultural and national differences, but they all have very similar systems now of trying to protect leaders. And it just struck me that those security systems are becoming more baroque, more important, more embedded in the state. And that's exactly what happened. After President Trump's near-death experience, there were more inquiries into the Secret Service. They're a regular feature of American history, going back to the McKinley assassination in 1901. Other people demanded protection. The case that actually struck me most wasn't necessarily the Trump killing, but an attack on Naomi, not an attack on Naomi Biden. She wasn't there, but Naomi Biden, the granddaughter of then President Joe Biden, had a Secret Service detail and who intervened in a crime, and fired their firearms. So it was reported. Now, back in 1906, Congress had said, well, yes, we will protect the president's wife. The Secret Service can, because it gives him peace of mind as he goes about his duties. But I don't think it was ever thought that you would have this kind of baroque security system. So the Trump assassination attempt showed you could see the baroque security system on camera. You didn't have to just read about it. You could watch it.
What about one that's closer to home for you, and that's the Brighton bombing? What was it back in, what year was it?
So we're in October 1984. It's the
and what was it, and what did you learn about that?
So the Brighton bombing was an attempt to assassinate then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. She was attending the Conservative Party conference. She was a Conservative. These party conferences happen every year in the UK, usually in seaside towns like Brighton. They are planned long in advance. Everybody knows that they're going to happen, and they know that the party leader will be there, and the party leader, Margaret Thatcher, will give an address to the conference. So, everything is known and pre-planned. Hotels have to be booked, etc. And so the IRA decided that they would rig up Provisional IRA, Irish terrorist organisation, who are the enemies of the British state, essentially been in armed conflict since so-called Troubles, since the early 1970s, wanted to kill Margaret Thatcher. They'd had an assassination campaign on UK mainland since 1975, but this is their most spectacular attempt. So they rig up the hotel, the Grand Hotel in Brighton, to blow her up. And they blow up the hotel. They do kill people, including a Conservative MP, but she survives. And the things that I learned from that is at that point, the British state says, we are going to have to draw in the horns of our democracy. We are going to have to make our leader less reachable. But we recognise, this is what her private secretary, Lord Butler, later Lord Butler says, we have to recognise that this is a bad thing we're about to do. And the second thing I realised is that the Thatcher assassination, which gets a lot of airplay, is really important because it's twinned with the assassination of Indira Gandhi. There are two female world statesmen in 1984. They're both assassinated within 3 weeks of each other. Indira Gandhi is assassinated by Sikh terrorists. And it's that twinning of the two which convinces all the world powers that they're going to have to cooperate. They're going to have similar security systems. They're all going to have to do the same thing, and they're going to have to collaborate with each other. Ronald Reagan says, right, we are going to have to collaborate more with the British against the IRA than we have been doing hitherto, and that opens up various doors for British intelligence.
Was Margaret Thatcher hurt at all?
She was shocked. She was in her bathroom, and she was, there was dust and rubble came into the room where she was. So she was shocked, and no doubt it hurt, but she wasn't hurt in the sense of anything serious. But she showed remarkable sang-froid. She gathered her cabinet ministers around her, still wearing her ball gown, because there had been a ball in the evening for the conference guests which she'd attended, and said, right, we're going to go on. I'm going to give my leader's address tomorrow. We're not going to let them scare us out of this place. Now, that's the public face of it, but let's remember, at that very time, the British state is saying, right, we're going to have to take this very seriously. We are going to have to protect not just Margaret Thatcher, but all senior leaders, and not just in the short term. It's going to have to be a perpetual system of security.
Well, on that point, a member of Parliament, Ian Gow, was assassinated, and who did that, and how was he assassinated?
So he was assassinated in the driveway of his home 6 years after the Thatcher attempt. Ian Gow was killed. Not only was he a Conservative member of Parliament in East Sussex, which is on the south coast of England, but he had been Margaret Thatcher's parliamentary private secretary, so he's close to her personally. The same people, or same terrorist group, Provisional IRA, put a car bomb under his car. Gets in the car, blows up, he's killed. That is plainly, a dreadful thing and a tragedy for Ian Gow and his family and his friends. However, for the historian, it also illustrates something different. It shows you what that British security system looked like 6 years after the Thatcher assassination. So one of the reasons why the IRA were going after this relatively junior politician is they couldn't get to senior politicians anymore. If you're a very senior British politician, you have a security system not unlike that for the American president. And the British have formalized this into 3 tiers of security. So now they've done it all explicitly by the time of the Gow assassination. So there's that tier. Then there are a second tier of people at risk who get some security. So you've got the very, very important people, like Margaret Thatcher and her successors. You've got the very important people who do have security, but not to the same level. And you have people like Ian Gow, who are assessed as being at risk, but just get security briefings and are told to be careful. And
what grade would you give the British investigators and the information they found out about the assassins, both in Brighton and Ian Gow? And I vaguely remember a figure of like 3,000 Brits were killed during that period.
Let's be clear. Most of those people were killed in Northern Ireland. So there was a lot of assassination of people you've never heard of in Northern Ireland. In 1987, there was an assassination of the Lord Chief Justice, the senior judge in Northern Ireland, on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And he was assassinated using enhanced explosives, which Colonel Gaddafi had supplied to the IRA. So the IRA, the assassins, become potentially more deadly. But the British intelligence system becomes increasingly sophisticated and at hunting assassins, and in particular, in the case of Ireland, they become much more active in placing informants in the terrorist organisations. Which brings its own problems, but they are able to pursue assassins more effectively.
Go back to Indira Gandhi. Who assassinated her?
So these were Sikh militants. There was a crisis in the Punjab, essentially a clash between the central Indian government and militant Sikhs who believe in something called Khalistan, which is an independent Sikh kingdom along the lines of the religious state, along the lines of the one that had existed in the 19th century before the British conquered it. And this assassination showed how a security system can turn on itself, because Indira Gandhi was assassinated in Delhi in her own secure compound, so she was heavily protected, or seemed to be heavily protected, and she was on her way across the compound to another building for a television interview with the British actor Peter Ustinov, who was making a TV. So he was in one part of the compound. She was walking over there. She was assassinated by her own bodyguards. So she went to go through a door, and two of her bodyguards assassinated her.
Why was her son Rajiv Gandhi assassinated?
Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated not by Sikhs but by Tamils, and he had sent Indian forces into northern Sri Lanka in the 1980s, and was regarded as an enemy of the Tamil Tigers, who are the main Tamil terrorist group. But his death, not wishing entirely to harp on this point, it kind of illustrates the security system again. It's relatively easy to work out who and why the people wanted to kill him. Is that after his mother's death, Rajiv becomes Indian Prime Minister, and he designs a security system for the Prime Minister, which would be like the American, kind of much upgraded, professional, full-time, very large Secret Service, essentially, just to protect the Prime Minister, him. And it does a good job of that. Unfortunately, he leaves government and he doesn't have that security system. So the timing of the assassination is the Tamil Tigers know they have to get to him while he is campaigning to become Prime Minister again, while he is briefly outside the very, very important person security system that he himself had devised. He's still got lots of security, but they can get to him in southern India where he's campaigning. He's expected to win, and his party does win. So he would be back in the system within a few weeks, but he's vulnerable. There's a window of vulnerability, and the Tamil Tigers get to him using a female suicide bomber.
There are lots of different ones I want to ask you about. They're not in any particular order. I did make a special note when you wrote the most consequential Soviet assassination of the 1930s was a guy named Kirov.
Yeah.
What is that story? It ends up, by the way, a person was murdered in a hotel that's right across the street from our building where the network is, the
So
Bellevue
is that
Hotel.
so? It's Krivitsky
Yeah,
we're talking about. Well, it's a tangled web. Kirov is the Soviet party boss in Leningrad, and he is regarded, probably by himself and by some other Soviet leaders, as the most likely person to succeed Stalin. He's younger than Stalin, something or Stalin protege. Of course, that isn't necessarily healthy in Soviet Russia, but he is killed by another Soviet communist, kind of a petty junior official in Leningrad, who thinks he's been passed over and that Kirov hasn't given him due respect, and so this man convinces himself that everybody will be glad, that everybody hates Kirov as much as him. So he takes a Russian revolver and he's in the same building as Kirov, and he shoots him and he kills him. And that's the story. I mean, that's what actually happens. But of course, Stalin isn't, he has to see conspiracies everywhere. It's just they're not sure. The NKVD, the Soviet secret police, they catch the assassin who tells them what he'd done, but they don't want that story. They want him to be working for the Trotskyites or the Latvians or the British. They keep changing, because Stalin would say, I want it to be the Latvians. So they go back to the assassin and torture him and say, it was the Latvians, wasn't it? He said, yes, it's the Latvians. So he'll say anything by this stage. So they go through all these conspiracies. Walter Krivitsky, the man who ends up dead in 1941, some years later, in the Bellevue Hotel in Washington, is a senior Soviet intelligence officer working in Western Europe. And after the Kirov assassination, Stalin started purging his own rivals, people he regarded as rivals, and eventually the Soviet intelligence apparatus itself. And so Krivitsky defects and he flees to America. And he ends up appearing in front of the Congress, and he testifies that the Soviets had this assassination, the thing called special tasks, which is true enough, professional assassins, which Stalin sends around the world, including to kill Trotsky in 1940. But he says Stalin killed Kirov. That this was all a plot, that Stalin wanted to get rid of Kirov because he saw him as a rival, and he wanted an excuse to start exterminating his rivals in the party. So that's Krivitsky's story, and soon thereafter, Krivitsky ends up dead. Technically, kind of formally, the Americans said it's a suicide. A revolver is next to his hand. There's always suspicion that the NKV did it, and it was assassination. For what it's worth, the NKVD records say, yeah, we were hunting Krivitsky. In fact, we were in touch with Krivitsky, but his code name was Enemy, which gives you an idea of what they thought of him. But he saved us the trouble by killing himself because he was so scared of being hunted.
By the way, that hotel is now called the George, and it's one block from Union Station. This is going on the same topic. We've talked about it here before, but it's fascinating. The Trotsky story. And why did Trotsky have to leave the Soviet Union?
Look, Trotsky has to lead the Soviet Union for the simple reason he loses the power struggle to Stalin. In many ways, Trotsky was the most charismatic and able of the Soviet leaders. Stalin is not regarded as particularly able, vicious and, but limited. But Stalin is the master of the internal politics of the Communist Party after Lenin's death, and Trotsky, knows he'll be killed. And so he leaves and he goes into exile and he goes to various places and he ends up in Mexico City. And Stalin is indeed, he wants to kill Trotsky, and so he tells he's got this organization called Special Tasks that created in the 1920s to go and assassinate people that he doesn't like, and Trotsky is there, but Trotsky's very wily. He's very well protected. Sort of Mexico City isn't a particularly easy place to operate, but Stalin, and one of the reasons we know quite a lot about this is that Stalin appoints a new head of Special Tasks called Pavel Sudoplatov, who miraculously survives till after the Cold War and writes his memoirs. So we kind of have the account of Stalin's chief assassin. Sudoplatov sends 3 assassination squads into Mexico City. They make 2 assassination attempts. Finally, they get an agent in. The head of the assassination squad seduces the agent's mother and recruits the agent, who's a kind of communist. And then the agent seduces Trotsky's secretary. That's how they get him into the compound. But it's a field extemporization. He has an ice pick in his pocket. You have to remember, it's not an ice pick for climbing mountains. It's an ice pick for putting ice in your drinks. And so it's a very small thing. But Trotsky, who is very short-sighted, the man gives him something to read. He bends down over his desk, and the assassin takes him in the back of the head with the ice pick.
I must mention that that ice pick somehow or another is in the Spy Museum here in Washington. If anybody,
wonderful, so it's not that big.
you can see though how it could kill somebody if it was.
Oh yeah, very sharp. They could have, sort of. I mean, it's an unusual assassination weapon, but it works in this instance.
Let me go far afield. This comment from you in your book, Menachem Begin himself was a well-known assassin.
Yes.
How? Where? When?
So Menachem Begin is the leader in the 1940s of a Zionist terrorist group fighting against British rule. Britain rules Palestine, which had taken over from the Ottoman Empire. Begin arrives as a refugee in Palestine during the Second World War, so he escapes from Eastern Europe. And in 1945, he becomes head of this group called the Irgun. And so the Irgun and the Stern Gang, which is led by Yitzhak Shamir, also later Prime Minister of Israel, kind of are what are called revisionists. So they kind of are usually seen as kind of right-wing terrorists. I mean, in fact, sort of the Irgun had been quite interested in cooperating with Mussolini against the British before the war. So Begin and Shamir in early 1944 take the decision that the enemy is not Nazi Germany. The enemy are the British imperialist oppressors in Palestine, who are getting in the way of the creation of a Jewish state. And so they start an assassination campaign against the Brits. And so kind of they are in in that sense, the procurers of assassination. It should be said that Begin actually prefers mass casualty terrorism to assassination, and Shamir is the real assassination specialist.
You do write about Sir Harold McMichael.
Yes. So he is the governor of Palestine, and he is the first very high-profile assassination attempt made, in this case, by the Stern Gang in 1944. And he is in his car. He's been driven between Jerusalem and Jaffa, and a Stern Gang assassination squad dressed in British Army uniform, armed with submachine guns, ambushes his car, machine guns it. They do succeed in wounding McMichael. They very badly wound the British Army officer who's in the seat next to him, and then escape into a Jewish settlement and get away.
In your book, you write this, and I wanted to ask you about this as it regards other assassinations. Soon thereafter, the leader of the McMichael attack assassinated the head of Special Branch's Jewish section, Tom Wilkin. Wilkin proved a much easier target than McMichael. He was walking unaccompanied in Jerusalem and was shot 11 times at short range.
Yeah.
You see this television shows of assassins all the time where they'll go up to somebody and just unload, 11, 12, the whole pistol, automatic pistol into a individual. What's that about? I mean, I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Well, now I haven't been shot, so this is this is a theory. But as I understand it, obviously, if you are shot with a full caliber pistol, then you may well be incapacitated, and while you can't defend yourself, if somebody really wants to kill you and knows what they're doing, they can shoot you multiple times in order to make sure you're dead. And then get away. I mean, and there are, plenty of other examples of that, both in the case of Anwar Sadat, the leader of Egypt, who is assassinated by Islamists, and Indira Gandhi, who we discussed earlier. They're shot first, and then somebody takes a fully automatic weapon in those cases and empties the full magazine into them. No human can survive, being shot by 30 rounds at point blank range. And so, that is the I hesitate to call this, but that's the ideal if you're a mid-20th century assassin, if you can get that many rounds.
Do I remember right that when Anwar Sadat was shot first from off the podium, that the guy ran up and then unloaded his whatever gun he had into the guy's body?
So he's shot by soldiers at a military parade, and he's hit, and there's panic. Other people are hit by the fire, and he is incapacitated, can't defend himself. So somebody then gets into the stand. One of the soldiers gets into the stand with an assault rifle, goes up to him and unloads a full magazine. So therefore, there's no chance that he might survive.
As you know, in the United States, Abe Lincoln, McKinley, Garfield, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and almost every president in the last 100 years has either had an attempted assassination or they caught them way before they could get close. What does this country look like from Great Britain and all of these assassinations? Do we have more of it than other countries? Put it in perspective, please.
No. The United States does not have more assassination than other countries. It has a president who is, has a number of roles. He's head of government, he's head of state, he's commander in chief. Whereas other countries, particularly democratic countries, might have a more diffused leadership structure. The United States does a lot of investigation of assassination. Therefore, we know a lot about the United States, whereas some other places there's assassination, but it's not so well known. And I think the nature of American politics, perhaps because of the multiple roles the president fulfills, is performative. And so there is, there is a lot of razzmatazz about assassinations. Both starting with McKinley, Temple of Music, Buffalo, literally kind of razzmatazz. Sort of from then you have the Secret Service. The Secret Service becomes, has other jobs, but it becomes a protection agency. Sort of in the early 20th century, that wasn't its primary duty. Its primary duty was kind of investigation. The Department of Justice has to create the Bureau of Investigation to take on some of the things that the Secret Service leaves behind when they're retasked. So there's a lot more talk in America. There's a lot more performance, I think, in America. Whereas in some other countries, they really want to, not talk about assassinations quite so much. And one thing that you see is constant inquiries into the Secret Service. One of the reasons we know quite a lot about protection. I should say it's much harder to find out about protection than states assassinating people. It's a breeze to find out something about America using drones, as opposed to how the protection system actually works. But the system that we know best, if we're in Britain or anywhere in the world really, is the American system. Because when I was talking about Donald Trump, you can see it, you can watch it function or not function on television.
When Soleimani was killed by this country, what kind of an assassination would you call that?
Well, it was called by the people at the time a kind of a personality assassination, because remember, the United States by this stage had a constantly working machine, which was picking off people, usually in places like Somalia or the Yemen, which nobody much talked about. Nobody but ultra specialists had heard of the people who were being assassinated. It wasn't always talked about. But what made Soleimani different is that the Americans had built him up, and rightly. I mean, it's not that he wasn't who they said he was, as the leader of the Quds Force of the Revolutionary Guard. They built him up as a primary enemy of the United States, and having done that, they then kind of killed a recognizable person who they'd already turned into something of a celebrity, rather than many other people who are killed that nobody's heard of.
What's your reaction when you saw, I mean, it's history now, the Osama bin Laden, when American went in and got him, and then also the ability to pinpoint Zawahiri, his number 2 guy, in a hotel in Kabul.
Yeah. What
does that look like to the future? The ability to use either drones or the helicopters or whatever. Is there going to be more of this, do you think, in the future?
Yes. I mean, it's, kind of, there's no doubt the system works. It can be done. And I suppose we have to bear in mind that this requires a state to make assassination very central to its foreign policy. I mean, the two classic examples at the moment are the United States and Israel in the West. You could say the Russians and indeed the Ukrainians in Central Europe, but kind of Britain uses the same systems as well. Kind of it uses drones in places like Syria to kill individuals. But to do it relentlessly, then there needs to be a lot of hardware, lots of military personnel, intelligence personnel, geospatial intelligence, to locate someone, signals intelligence, kind of all the highest tech things. It's not only the drone with the missile or the airplane with the missile or, kind of, or anything like that. It is really, you need to put a lot of effort into it. The Americans do, and Israelis do, others do. And once you've got that system, then it's hard not to use it. It's quite a big political act to say we can do something, but we're not going to. Whereas, sort of earlier, kind of, as sort of there's a history of the American state assassinating people after the Second World War, but they didn't have really the capability to do it relentlessly. It was, it was a bit hit and miss and mainly miss. It had a lot of political blowback, but the results were fairly modest, if you want to put it like that. If you take the trouble of developing a system that works, then you tend to use it.
Other than the assassination of the Archduke in 1914, what other assassinations do you think were the most significant since 1914?
So the one that I choose, but I suppose the kind of the one that I would focus on now is the assassination of Sir Lee Stack. Now, most people have not heard of Sir Lee Stack. Sir Lee Stack was, it's 1924, he is the commander-in-chief of the Egyptian army, and he is the governor of Sudan. And at that stage, Sudan is the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. So the British effectively control Egypt, and Britain and Egypt jointly control the Sudan. So Lee Stack is assassinated by Egyptian nationalists, and the British say, right, what we're going to do as punishment, of various punishments for this, aimed at the Egyptian government, is we are going to sever irrevocably the Sudan from Egypt. It won't be, kind of joined to Egypt anymore. It will be independent. So when Sudan is given its independence in 1956, if memory serves right, it's an independent country. This huge country in North Central Africa, which now two countries, but borders on, kind of many other African countries. It becomes a country largely because of an assassination. It didn't happen. So that is something that most people aren't very interested in or don't know much about unless they are Sudanese specialists, or if they are Sudanese or Egyptians. But that really changes that bit of the world. The other one is of a character called the Old Marshal, Zhang Zhulin, who's a Chinese politician general who rules Manchuria, which is northeast Manchuria. And he has ruled it for 18 years when he is assassinated by the Japanese army, who are technically supposed to, the Japanese army is supposed to be allied with him in Manchuria, and there are Japanese officers on his train, but another group of Japanese officers who want to get rid of him blow up the train and kill him. And that really kind of opens the door for the collapse of Japanese democracy, as essentially the army runs out of control and takes over Japan in the 1930s and shapes the politics of China, first with the kind of rise of the KMT, the Chinese nationalists, and subsequently their defeat by the Chinese Communist Party and the creation of the PRC. So, there's a lot of water that runs under the bridge from 1928. But that assassination kind of was pivotal in the future of both Japan and China. So not particularly well known, though he was an important, powerful figure in his day, but really substantial in its impact.
Before we let you go, tell us about the University of Leeds.
University of Leeds, founded in 1904 under the reign of Edward VII. It's a large research-intensive university in northern England. It has about 40,000 students and 10,000 staff. I am the Professor of International History and Politics at the University of Leeds, and I preside over a degree called International History and Politics. It's a history degree. Despite the name, it's not a joint honours degree with politics. It's a history degree which studies the relationship between kind of the international system, the 20th, 21st centuries, the history thereof. And so that is one of the few places in England that you can come to university and say, I want to do international history and politics as my first degree. It's not even a major. It's, it's all international history and politics all the time. And there are many young people in Britain and from further afield who want to do that. And we provide that degree to them.
Is the Leeds University a state university?
Yes. There is, I think I'm right in saying, only one private university in the UK. So all major universities in the UK are what is known as public institutions. They are governed under public law, but they are freestanding and free governing degree awarding bodies. So they're not state in the sense that they are controlled by the state or by any locality. There are no, if you like, local universities in that sense. They are all national.
As long as we have an expert here, I want to ask you, what's the tuition?
The tuition is in good old English pounds, £9,250 per year.
There's some of the education here is already up to 85,000 a year.
I know. I have a goddaughter who's currently at Cornell, and so I am. Thank God I don't have to pay the fees, but I'm painfully aware that isn't expensive. I should say that figure is true of all UK universities because there is a government-imposed cap on the fees that we can charge. So even if you come and study medicine at the University of Leeds has got a big medical school. If you're a British citizen, we can't charge you anymore. Unfortunately, if you're an American citizen, we will charge you about 3 times as much. But I still think that's pretty good value compared to equivalent US universities.
Where did you get your education?
I was an undergraduate at Brasenose College, Oxford, and I got my PhD at Christ College, Cambridge.
And where are you from in Great Britain?
I am from the southeast of England, the county of Kent, and specifically an area of northwest Kent called the Medway Towns, Rochester, Chatham, and Gillingham. And I can trace my family back as far as records go, which for us is 1762. So that's where I'm from.
Some of your family probably knew Charles Dickens from down there.
They did not probably know him, but I can say that when I was at school, my parents bought my school uniform in the same tailors on Rochester High Street, sadly no longer there, that Dickens used and got suits for his sons, and they had a kind of letter from Dickens on the wall saying, I've ordered, my sons can have this. You are not to make them fancy clothes, because Charles Dickens' sons were notoriously spendthrifts. So he was very strict with what his sons could have. But my parents bought me a nice school uniform there.
Finally, has anybody done this extensive a study on assassins that you know of? Anybody else?
I don't believe so. There are many, many general histories of assassination. Most famously, a book called Political Murder, written in the 1980s by a former OSS officer who had investigated the German opposition in the attempts to assassinate Hitler. But he was a professor at Harvard, and he wrote a history of assassination. But they tend not to be archivally based. In order to get the span, kind of people do very archivally based studies of one country or a specific assassination. There are many, many hundreds of thousands, even of volumes on that. But trying to pull it all together and doing it through the archives, I think, is a fairly unique endeavor.
Based on all the research you've done, anything that you're going to do to continue this story? And are you putting anything in an archive that will be available to others later on?
No, all the stuff that I have used is available already in public archives. I haven't used any secret information. I mean, I've used stuff generated by secret organizations which are now archivally based. So anybody can look at my footnotes and follow my archival trail, and I can tell them that there is a lot more that even sort of kind of one man working on it for quite a long time. I think I mean, there are two things that I might do in future. If any organizations who are involved in security, kind of protecting people would like to work with me, then, as I say, getting inside that system is hard. So if I ever had the opportunity to do that, I would. And I am interested in the broader question of how Western states came to feel so insecure about themselves, even when the West from 1968 onwards seems triumphant in many other ways. And assassination is part of that story, but I might well broaden that out to the other roots of insecurity within the international system.
The name of the book is Death to Order, A Modern History of Assassination, and our guest has been University of Leeds Professor Simon Ball. Thank you, sir.
It's been my very great pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for tuning into this week's Booknotes Plus podcast. If you have a moment, please consider rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback will help others discover the program. And don't forget to share this episode with friends and family. For the latest on new episodes, schedule updates, and more, follow us on X @C-SPAN Radio.